May I stand? I fight better standing. I say those words when addressing the House Judiciary Committee in 1969 about the Electoral College. I'm against it. Let me set the scene. I enter the chamber and sit, and when it is my turn, as I stand, the chairman says, "Miss Rankin, you may remain seated." I suppose he does that in deference to my advanced age. I'm 88 years old. That's when I say, "May I stand? I fight better standing," but I'm already standing, so I'm not asking permission. I'm just trying to be polite. I'm Jeannette Rankin, not a household name or as well known as I ought to be, which is why I am delighted that Beth Rankin Urich has written this play about me. Yes, Beth's maiden name is Rankin. She did the research and learned that her great-grandfather and my grandfather were brothers. So we're related. Oh, I like the idea of Beth's voice speaking my words. You know, she and I never met, but we could have. She could have marched with me in the Jeannette Rankin Brigade in 1968. Back then, Beth wasn't very political, but she is today. Hence this show about me, in which you will learn about my accomplishments and my regrets. My biggest regret is that I'm not still alive today, because if I were, I would have so much to say about what's going on in this country. Let me just say that I believe in women. We need more women in elected public offices. We need women to clean up the social disgraces that exist in this country. I believe in the League of Women Voters who promote defending democracy and empowering voting. Do you see this ballot box? That's my favorite box. Oh, I know some women might prefer a jewelry box or a hat box. I've had plenty of those. But for me, the ballot box symbolizes the right and duty that each of us has to vote for the government we want. My entire life has been determined by the votes I have cast. I voted against entrance into both world wars. I introduced and voted for the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote from sea to shining sea. I voted with my feet when I led the Jeannette Rankin Brigade, but I'm getting ahead of myself, as I always do. When I was 30 years old, I asked, what can I, one woman, do? And I've spent my entire life fighting for what I believe in. I fought for suffrage for a decade and got it. I've fought for peace for 55 years and haven't come close. Now, as a lifelong pacifist, I'm sure you are aware that when I use the word fighting, I use it with intention. My story begins on a ranch outside Missoula, Montana, where I was born in 1880. Growing up in the West with its bright blue skies and broad horizons shaped my outlook in the West, men and women worked side by side. They share responsibilities, but women didn't have the vote. That was wrong. Eventually, I do something about that. Yes, I do something about that. But first, let me tell you about my family. My father, John Rankin, a carpenter, arrived in Missoula, Montana from Canada with a toolkit and the will to succeed. My mother, Olive Pickering, a school teacher, arrived from New Hampshire. They met and married. A year later, I arrived. While Beth was doing research at the Jeannette Rankin Peace Center in Missoula, the executive director gave Beth my christening dress. Yes, isn't that amazing? She said, here it is, look. Isn't this sweet? And she said, well, as long as Beth and I were related, she thought Beth ought to have it. You know, that christening dress might have been worn by more than just me. I'm the eldest of 7 children, 6 girls and 1 boy. We always call Wellington the boy. As a girl, what I liked most is riding horseback alongside my father as he surveys the ranch. That's the privilege of being the eldest. I'm very practical. And one day while I'm at the corral, one of our horses comes back with a bloody gash on its shoulder. The ranch hands just stand there. Oh no, they're getting ready to put that poor horse out of its misery. Wait! I run inside. I come back with a needle and thread. I sew up the bloody 10-inch gash. I saved the horse's life. Another time, one of our ranch dogs gets his paw caught in a trap. I amputate the paw. And then I make him a little bootie out of leather. Now, you wear that bootie, Shep. You be a good boy. Another time, I'm still a child, Father gets some equipment from Missoula to help lift the hay into the hayloft. The pulley mechanism jams. The ranch hands just stand there. Wait, Father, I think I can figure this out. Look, if we just move the pulley from there over to, yes, now it works. My father is so proud of me, I almost burst. Another time, Father wants to rent one of his houses in Missoula, and the prospective tenant wants a boardwalk. Father refuses. Well, he's very thrifty, Scottish, you know. So I get the lumber. I build the boardwalk. I guess you can see I'm pretty handy with tools and a needle and thread. When our sister, Felena, is just 9 years old, she dies. I'm only 11 years old. Our mother grieves deeply. And after that, it's pretty much up to me to raise my siblings. Later, they said I was bossy. Well, of course I was bossy. I had to be. We all graduate from college. I graduate in 1902. I major in biology and do my senior paper on snails. I don't much like school. You might have figured that out. I write in my diary, go, go, go. It doesn't matter where. At the first opportunity, just go. But it takes me almost a decade to figure out where. When I'm 24 years old, I head east for the first time with a school friend. Wellington is studying at Harvard Law School and falls ill. I nurse Wellington to health. Wellington gets well. And then we get ourselves invited to President Teddy Roosevelt's inaugural ball. Oh, an evening of dancing and beautiful ball gowns. I am an accomplished seamstress, and I love looking. Oh, the president's wife, Mrs. Roosevelt, is in pale blue brocaded satin with a little dip at the waist. Oh, it's exquisite. Then we travel to New York City. We stay at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. I love promenading up and down Fifth Avenue, but I am appalled by the filth and slums. I go home, but I'm no longer a simple ranch girl. The poverty that I have witnessed in Washington, D.C. and New York City and Boston haunts my dreams. I head west to San Francisco, which is also rampant with squalor. I stumble upon a settlement house on Telegraph Hill and start working there for a few months. And I begin reading the already renowned social worker, Jane Addams. Wait, I'll become a social worker to help eradicate the suffering that surrounds me. To do that, I head back to New York City. I study at the School of Philanthropy on East 22nd Street. It's now Columbia University School of Social Work. Morning, classes. Afternoon, field work. I am assigned to the Jewish-Italian neighborhood just near the Bowery, the happiest place in all New York City, despite the misery. Then, one afternoon, I am told that I have to take a little 3-year-old boy to the orphanage. Oh, dear. I arrive at the tenement house. Oh, there he is, just 3 years old. His face is full of love and sunshine. Yes. The mother has 2 younger children, and the father has gone missing. She doesn't seem to mind as I take him. I can't believe it. As we leave, she just waves. Bye-bye. Oh. Before long, I realize my calling is not to be a social worker, but to work for social change. I head to the state of Washington. I study, I read, I set my sights on women's suffrage. Now, I am an excellent organizer. I get sent to Florida, Michigan, and Ohio, and wait, why not get the vote for the women in my home state of Montana? To do that, I travel 9,000 miles all around the state. Many years later, John F. Kennedy says that I traveled by horseback. That was just a Wild West myth. I don't travel by horseback. I travel by train, but places that are inaccessible by train, I drive. Wellington teaches me how to drive his Model T. I love driving fast. Let's go! I am a grassroots organizer down to my toes. I speak everywhere. In schools, I tell children, why don't you go home and ask your fathers why they don't want your mothers to vote? I speak on street corners, outside saloons and dance halls. I have a little formula for speaking that always works. I begin by saying something pleasant like, "Good evening, gentlemen. You know, your representative is a fine, upstanding man. He's against women's suffrage, and that's your fault. You haven't told him how you feel. I know you men aren't afraid of anything." And then I relate a little anecdote. There was a timid little boy sitting on his father's lap, and the father was explaining that the little boy didn't have anything to be afraid of. "Pa, what if you'd see a great big lion?" "Oh, you don't have to worry about lions. They're way out in the woods. They don't come round here." "Pa, wouldn't you be afraid if you saw a great big black bear?" "Oh, I wouldn't be afraid of that bear, and I wouldn't let it hurt you." "Pa, is Ma the only thing you're afraid of?" Well, then the men would laugh, and then I'd say, "But you men of the West aren't afraid of your women folk, and you're not afraid to give them the vote." Then I make my pitch. It is altogether fitting and proper for a mother to sit at the bedside of her child and nurse the child through typhoid fever. It is altogether fitting and proper for that same woman to be able to vote for measures that regulate the milk supply from which typhoid can spread. It works. Women get the vote in the state of Montana in 1914. Yes! But I'm exhausted. I need a break. I jump on a boat and head to New Zealand. New Zealand, by the way, is the first country ever to give women the vote in 1893. I work there for a couple of years as a dressmaker and learn about the issues of working women. Then I return to Montana, where I have set the stage to run for the House of Representatives. Oh, yes. While campaigning, I criticize the federal government, which has appropriated $300,000 to study fodder for hogs, and only $10,000 to study the needs of our children. If the hogs of the nation are 10 times more important than our children, then it is high time that women had the vote and could get their influence felt. Now, in this election, I am running alongside 6 men. Every voter, remember, men and women now, has 2 votes. So I say, vote for the man you want and vote for me. The first time I can vote in a federal election, I vote for myself. But have I won? No one can tell me. I call the newspaper. Yes, editor, I would like some election results. Woodrow Wilson won? Good. What about Jeannette Rankin? You don't know? Thank you. 3 days later, when I open my front door, I find that I have won. My front yard is filled with reporters and cameras and flash bulbs flashing. Oh, Go away, I tell them. I'm not going to come back and out unless all of you journalists vacate my front yard. You know, that very day, I might have been the most famous woman in the entire world. Yes, world. Because you see, I am the first woman anywhere to get herself elected to a federal legislative office. People are surprised. They're shocked. And no one knows what to expect when I arrive in Washington. Some newspapers say I will probably ride in on a pony carrying a Winchester rifle. Others say I'm sure to be a dried-up old maid. On my way to Washington, D.C., I stop off and speak at Carnegie Hall to an audience of 3,000. Wow. Later, the reviewer says, "Charm would be the first word to use in describing Jeannette Rankin. She wore a simple frock of Georgette crepe with a wide band of fur at the collar." Oh, why do people spend so much time talking about what we women wear? He continued, "Her face was always smiling, and her voice seemed ready to break into the laughter of irrepressible youth." Oh, fiddlesticks. I'm 36 years old. He continues, "She might have been 19 or 23. I'm 36. But judging from her words, she must have been much older. Well, I'm only 36. I tell my audience, I pledge to stand by the men, women, and children in my state. But I feel a special urgency to represent all the women in this grand country. The mothers who don't want their sons to go off to war. The wives who can't afford groceries for the table. Little girls growing up in states where women do not have the vote. When I get to Washington, the timing is momentous. President Wilson asks for a vote on whether or not to enter the Great War. This is to be my first vote. This is to be the first vote ever cast by a woman in U.S. Congress. My women friends say, "Jeannette, vote for war or you will set our cause back 20 years. Men say, "Jeannette, vote like a man. Vote for war." At the first roll call, I do nothing. At the second roll call, I stand. I want to stand by my country, but I cannot vote for war. I vote no. I am one of only 50 who vote no. Later, it was reported that I collapsed. I did not collapse. But that first vote of mine determined the rest of my life. You know, you can no more win a war than you can win an earthquake. I do put forth the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote across our wonderful country, and I vote for it. It passes in the House, dies in the Senate. When it finally passes in both houses and is then ratified in 1920, I'm no longer in Congress. But I am the only woman who voted to give women the vote. That's what I'm proudest of. Although I'm not in Congress long, I do have an impact on working women. a young woman comes to me and says, Miss Rankin, we need your help. At the Bureau of Printing and Engraving, there are 3,000 of us girls. We're printing currency and Liberty bonds, and we have to raise our arms several hundred times every day, and we're working 10, 12-hour shifts with no breaks. 2 of us have already been institutionalized for nerves, and several of us have fainted, and others have been threatened with sexual assault, and well, this is not right. I go to the director of the Bureau, who says that everything is going according to schedule. I doubt that. I invite some of the girls to come to my apartment Sunday morning for breakfast, and while they are there, they sign affidavits describing the abuses they are suffering. I take these signed affidavits to Treasury Secretary McAdoo, who says, "Good morning, Miss Rankin. Oh, what a pleasure to see you, but I don't have a lot of time for you today. My friends and I are just getting ready to leave on a boating party." A boating party? Sir, I demand that the Bureau of Printing and Engraving be put on an 8-hour work schedule by the 5th of July. Well, the 5th of July is just the very day we're getting back from our vacation. He leaves. His assistant walks in. "Hello, Miss Rankin. You're new here, aren't you? You don't know how things work here in Washington, D.C., do you? It takes lots of time for things to get changed and schedules to get Sir, I have 30 signed affidavits, and if the Bureau of Printing and Engraving isn't put on an 8-hour work schedule by the 5th of July, I shall turn them over for a congressional investigation. I leave." When I get back to my office, the phone rings almost immediately. "Hello, Rankin speaking. There'll be a meeting today at 1 o'clock. Good. The girls will be dismissed in order to attend. Good. I'll be right back. Good." I return, but I'm nervous that the girls won't show up for fear of being fired. But when I get there, the corridor is filled. 200 women line the halls. They testify for several hours, and then we are all released. And that night, the newspaper says, "Bureau of Printing and Engraving to institute 8-hour work day." I bet that is the fastest change that's ever happened in any governmental agent in D.C. I could have accomplished so much more. But when a country is at war, very little else gets done. I'm not reelected. That's a regret. Armistice is declared at 11 o'clock on the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. And the following spring, I traveled to Zurich, Switzerland, for the Second International Women's Conference on Peace and Freedom. I tell our hosts, "Good morning, guten Tag. We are so grateful to be here in Switzerland, and we see in this clear atmosphere that war truly is the supreme folly. And we are the first organization to denounce the Treaty of Versailles, saying that it will certainly lead to further conflict, which it does, the Second World War." Well, back in the United States, people are sometimes surprised to learn that I spend as much time as I do in the state of Georgia. Well, why not? The climate is much milder there than it is in Montana, and it's only 600 miles to Washington, D.C., as opposed to 2,200 miles to Montana. I buy a little farm, 64 acres for $600, and then while I'm traveling, the farmhouse burns down. Well, I try building a rammed earth house. That doesn't go well. Eventually, I move into the 3-room caretaker's cottage at Shady Grove, and my caretaker, Wonder Robinson, lives in the big house. I like it that way. Oh, my little 3 rooms, I don't have running water. Why do I need running water? I can just walk outside my door and dip my pail into the well. On days when I'm not expecting visitors, I just laze around the entire day in my bathrobe, drinking buttermilk. And when my oriental carpet gets shabby, well, I just sit on the floor with little cans of red and black paint and retrace the design. In 1924, I found the Georgia Peace Society, which I use as my headquarters for my peace campaign. And I do become more of a pacifist the older I get. Oh, I study Mahatma Gandhi, and I travel several times to India, but he is assassinated before my last trip, so I've never had a chance to meet him. In 1934, the American Legion accuses me of being a communist. The controversy arises over a misunderstanding. The sum of my radicalism would appear to be my opposition to war. I sue the Macon Evening newspaper for labeling me a communist. A year later, the whole case is settled. It doesn't go to trial. The editor apologizes and hands me $1,000 and says I'm a nice lady. I am still very much in demand in Washington, D.C. I travel several times to Europe, and I see what is happening in Germany. In 1939, I testified to the House Foreign Affairs Committee and say, Nazi, the first step towards Nazism is to ignore or decrease congressional powers. And that is exactly what is happening in this country. Now, this is back in 1939, so I leave Georgia, I go back, and I decide I will run again for the House of Representatives from the state of Montana. I plan to campaign by speaking at 52 high schools. I write the principals and tell the principals when I will be arriving. I don't put a return address so they can't refuse. I tell the students, you can no more win a war than you can win an earthquake. Go home, talk to your parents, tell them that war is no way to settle a dispute. I am not an isolationist, but I can't bear the thought of our men dying on foreign soil. I register to be on the ballot just 6 days before my 60th birthday. My campaign pledge, prepare to the limit for defense. Keep our men out of Europe. It works. I am re-elected to the House of Representatives from the state of Montana. Fiorello LaGuardia, now mayor of New York City and former congressional colleague, wires me. Congratulations, Jeannette. I always knew you would win. Love, Fiorello. Well, it's true. He and I once were an item. And he put his hand around my waist and said to my sister, Edna, you don't know how hard I tried to get this gal to marry me. I never married. I suppose most men would find me too strong and stubborn. Oh, I know there is some curiosity about my romantic relationships, also with women. Let me just be very candid. I am not cut out for a long-term relationship with either sex. I think more important than the state of my sexual preferences is the state of our union. And then, December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. President Roosevelt asks for us to have a vote on whether or not to enter the Second World War. Oh, no hesitation on my part this time around. I say, as a woman, I cannot go to war, and I refuse to send anyone else. I vote no. I am the sole dissenting vote. Wellington wires, Jeannette, Montana is against you 110%. I'm not reelected. That's a regret. I spent the next few years on the ranch looking after my aging mother, who spends her days canning applesauce. She cans 6 quarts of applesauce every day. She cans pickles and makes jams and jellies and oh, if any of you has ever had to look after an aging relative, well, you know what that's like. Eventually, I take her to my sister Edna, and I head back to Georgia. Oh, I do love my life in Georgia. Wait. Oh, I get a wonderful idea. I'm going to build a home for elderly, well, older single women who don't want to spend the rest of their lives either living alone or with their children. Oh, I built it out of concrete blocks, and it's on a hill overlooking Shady Grove. 10 pie-shaped bedrooms around a central area for cooking and eating, and only 1 refrigerator. Oh, that's just a detail. But there's also a little pond for swimming and boating and a vegetable garden. Several of my friends come and take a look, and even strangers drop in, but nobody moves in. That's a regret. Well, whenever and wherever I am asked, I continue speaking. In the course of my career, I deliver over 5,000 speeches. I am considered feminine and forceful, usually controversial, always ahead of my time. In Nashville, I tell a group of young women, you have to get to the people that don't come to meetings. It never did us suffragists any good to just sit around and talk to each other. If you want to start a revolution, you have to get to the public. You have to picket. This is no time to be polite. Oh, no. And then I wonder what is coming next, because, oh, the situation is so desperate. Vietnam has already reared its ugly head. Oh, you know, 10,000 young men have already died in Vietnam. It reminds me of the ranch. Back on the ranch, a cow would have a calf, and then a few days later, some man comes and takes the calf away, and then the mama cow bawls and then goes and has another calf. I think it is unconscionable that these 10,000 men have already died, and I am convinced that if 10,000 women put their minds to it, they could stop the war, even if it meant going to jail. Oh, I am so disappointed. I am so disillusioned. I wonder if my entire life, hasn't been in vain. The phone rings. Hello, Rankin speaking. You want to organize a woman's peace protest march? And if I lead it, you'll call it the Jeannette Rankin Brigade? Oh, I may be almost 90, but you can count me in. Let's march! We march. We march from Union Station to the Capitol. The world's leading American feminists. Coretta Scott King, Julie Belafonte, Rosa Parks, Ruby Dee, Jessica Mitford, Jane Spock, Susan Sontag, and behind us, 5,000 women. We march. Judy Collins sings, "This land is your land." We march. And when we get to the Capitol, we are stopped by the Capitol Police, who tell us we are infringing on a federal law that does not allow demonstrations at our Capitol. This is wrong. I protest. And eventually, the case goes to the Supreme Court. And in 1972, thanks to the Jeannette Rankin Brigade, we can now have peaceful demonstrations at our Capitol. A reporter asks if I can imagine ever having a woman president. Oh my goodness, yes. Well, of course there'll be a woman president someday. Well, it's inevitable. Well, it's desirable even. Men will be delighted. A man inherently likes to be governed by a woman. Matrimony proves that. Oh, back in Georgia, I befriend a restless young law student who pitches his tent on my front yard at Shady Grove. 2 days later, I invite him in. John Kirkley cooks, cleans, does secretarial work, schedules my speeches, drives me everywhere. I decide to repay his law school debt of $3,000. My friends are appalled, and I tell them, look, do you think I can be taken in by a 29-year-old boy? Well, I know he's using me, but I'm using him as well, and at my age, I can do what I want with my money. I spend the last years of my life working for governmental reform. That electoral college, we all know, it's a sham. What we need is participatory democracy, and we need preferential voting. It works like this. All serious candidates are put on a ballot, and then eligible voters rank them in order of preference. Some call it ranked voting. Oh, no, not Rankin voting, oh, but that would be nice. And then if the first place isn't a majority, they look to the second place. Well, this does away with primaries and runoffs, and I also think we only need a unicameral legislature. I mean, nowadays, do we really need both the Senate and the House? Oh, and I also think that two-party system is dreadful. I mean, all most people do is work hard to get themselves elected, and then once they're in office, all they do is work hard to get themselves reelected. They don't do anything. It's just talk, talk, talk. In February 1972, I traveled to New York City, where I am recognized as the world's outstanding living feminist. I am the first inducted into the Susan B. Anthony Hall of Fame. I speak to 1,500 women, and I say, women, I believe in you. We need more of you to get elected to governmental offices. We need you to clean up the social disgraces that exist in this country. And near the end of my life, when I'm asked, Jeannette, would you do it all over again? I say, oh, yes, I'd do it all over again. And next time, I'd be nastier. I do accomplish a lot. But what I'm not able to accomplish is to leave my life when I'm ready to go. My broken hip never heals. That excruciating nerve that's been bothering me for 50 years, well, I have it severed, and my jaw drops. I can't speak properly anymore. And you know how important speaking always has been for me. A stroke takes my voice. I weigh just 80 pounds. I beg my doctor in Carmel, California, where I'm now living, to withdraw my medications. He refuses. I die in my sleep just 3 weeks before my 93rd birthday. But now, let's have some positive audience participation. I'm going to list some things that I have accomplished, and I'd like you to yell out, check, if you agree with me. Let's get going. Get the vote for women in the state of Montana in 1914. Check! Vote against entrance into the First World War. Check! Yes. Initiate and then vote for the 19th Amendment. Check! Vote against entrance into the Second World War. Check! March with my feet to protest Vietnam. Check! Abolish the Electoral College. Check! No, that hasn't happened, and hopefully it will happen someday. But today we have something much more important to consider ourselves. We have to consider our democracy. It is at risk. It is in danger. This is the 105th year. The birthday party for the League of Women Voters is now 105 years old. And they have, since the very beginning, and I was there at the very beginning, they have been empowering, voting, and defending democracy. Are you ready to defend democracy today? Check. Check. You should be writing your congresspeople. You should be calling your senators. You need to write and call and speak and march. I want to know exactly what you plan to do to save our democracy. And I'd like you right now to stand as you are able and tell me what you would do to save our democracy. Will you vote? Will you stand? Will you speak? Will you write? Will you march? At a count of 3, I need to hear what you will do. 1, 2, 3.
March!
March, vote, fight, yes. Yes, I need to hear that. You know, if I were still alive, I would lead another Jeannette Rankin brigade. But now it's up to you. I know that I am taking some of you out of your comfort zone, but that is where you are going to have to be if we want to save our democracy. And then you can say with me, may I stand? I fight better standing. Say it now. May I stand? I fight better standing.